news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Well, the feds are on the job, and there are results coming, maybe not as fast and furious as people would like, and maybe not sweeping in certain politicians that they would like swept in, but Boston, the federal prosecutors in Boston just announced indictments in a $7 million SNAP fraud case, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. 2 Haitian nationals have been charged with running so-called ghost stores, tiny shops with barely any inventory that were somehow cashing $540,000 a month in EBT. You know, food stamps, basically. That's 6 times the SNAP volume of a real, fully stocked supermarket. The stores were allegedly used to trade EBT for cash and illegal items and, you know, sort of scaling the street-level fraud with transfer payment programs like SNAP and EBT. Back in Minnesota, of course, part of the frustration and the outrage, even coming from, you know, inside the House, all those DHS, Department of Human Services employees that penned that open letter before the first of the year, accusing Tim Walz's office of turning a blind eye, willfully turning a blind eye to the fraud that they suspected was happening with respect to daycare centers, perhaps home health care businesses, assisted living facilities, autism programs for autistic kids, and so on and so forth. Part of the problem and the skepticism is because this has been reported intermittently for at least a decade. And it's not all Nick Shirley. I know, per Tim Walz's announcement yesterday that he wasn't running again, as we discussed earlier in the program. It's Trump. It's mean-spirited Trump that's raining on our neighborliness in Minnesota, and right-wing YouTubers. Didn't mention Nick Shirley by name, but that's who he's talking about because of all the attention he's generated with a simple site visit to Quality Learning Center that has been renamed to Quality Learning Center, and others. But this goes back, as I said, a decade, and we've been playing you over the last 2 days clips from local reporters, to their credit, raising these questions, doing site visits just like Nick Shirley, finding the same things years ago, including January of this year, that Nick Shirley found, which is no kids. Actually worse than what Nick Shirley found, because they often found no kids and no employees and no cars in the parking lot, just an address where the government sends checks. You also had this story, getting back to the point I've been making about going back 10 years. This is a Fox 9 report, Fox affiliate in Minneapolis, going back to 2015, a report on daycare center fraud. They had surveillance tapes from 2015 in Hennepin County. By the way, Mike Freeman was the Hennepin County prosecutor at the time, the same guy who was the prosecutor during the George Floyd imbroglio. And the focus of the expose, or the individual who helped them focus their expose, perhaps that's better worded, was a former fraud investigator named Steve Halicki, who was dismissed, he argued at the time, because he was putting pressure on these agencies to close down fraudulent daycare centers.
Order for the scheme to work, the daycare centers need to sign up low-income families that qualify for child care assistance funding. These surveillance videos are from a case prosecuted by Hennepin County. They show parents checking their kids into a center only to leave with them a few minutes later. Sometimes no children would show up. But either way, the center would bill the state for a full day of child care. This video from that same case shows a man handing out envelopes of what are believed to be kickback payments to parents who are in on the fraud.
Where was the money going?
I don't know exactly where it went.
Well,
But
and how does Mike? That's Mike Freeman. How do you not know where the money went? Even back then, it was tiptoeing around these matters because of the political sensitivity. That's what Steve Halicki believed.
Steve Halicki spent 15 years as a welfare fraud investigator for Hennepin County. He came to us to grind an axe.
They don't want a fraud unit to do anything. They want a fraud unit on paper.
Halicki was fired in 2013 while in the midst of a big investigation. The county claims he was an insubordinate bully whose tactics were hampering efforts to catch welfare cheats.
They don't want to point fingers at various organizations and people. This is nothing but a giant cover-up. You're driving down the street, you have no idea.
Halicki contacted the Fox 9 investigators after seeing our series of reports on Deco daycare centers. We uncovered evidence the company was collecting millions in public subsidies for providing bogus child care services to low-income families.
In essence, this scheme was really involved creating a criminal enterprise.
In December, Ramsey County charged Deco's owner with fraud.
The daycares that I'm going to be showing you from this point on all bill over $100,000 a month.
Halicki says before he was fired, he was tracking a similar scheme in Hennepin County involving multiple child care centers. He offered to take us on a driving tour to show what he'd uncovered.
Oh, what does this one say on the door?
7 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are no lights on.
This building is housing its third daycare center in as many years.
They just got a new license.
The two previous daycares had their public subsidies stopped by the county because of billing irregularities.
Hour after hour, I would sit here and document nothing.
Halicki discovered one center was charging the county for kids who were never dropped off.
See those double doors over there?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a daycare center. You wouldn't know it from this.
He took us to center after center that had no sign outside to indicate it was a daycare. When we knocked on the doors during posted business hours, no one answered.
If you're driving down the street, would you even know this was a daycare center?
Probably not.
Yet each location has a state license to operate
But there's nobody in there right now.
and is eligible to collect child care subsidies to serve low-income families.
I mean, that's blacked out up there, so you can't even tell when the lights are on or off.
Exactly.
Why would they do that?
So you can't prove when they're working and when they're not. You could be billing till 11 o'clock at night, but they've gone home, 6 hours earlier.
For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Bill Shipley. He spent 22 years as a federal prosecutor, 8 years in private practice, and he posted an interesting piece at his Substack. Yes, the Trump Bondi DOJ is aggressively pursuing multiple fraud investigations in Minnesota. Well, I sure hope so, and we know so to a large extent, because obviously the local authorities have had more than a decade to pursue them, and they haven't shown much interest, have they? Bill Shipley, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, give us your handle on, the status of where things are, given all of the information that's in the public domain about these fraudsters, Somali and otherwise.
Okay, well, let's talk about Minnesota just, as an example. But, my view is just an example. This problem extends across the country.
Yeah.
It begins with the issue that social welfare programs are handled by the federal government as send the money out first, figure out the legitimacy after. The government functions, the federal government functions, and I get a lot of fraud cases as a prosecutor. The federal government functions on the basis of after-the-fact audit accountability. So, for example, there's no way to confirm the accuracy of every Medicaid billing from every doctor in the country. I mean, you're talking about millions a year. So they simply pay the claims, and then they rely on an audit process to sort of dig out doctors who are, committing fraud. Now, this problem becomes even worse in welfare programs, such as those under scrutiny in Minnesota, where the states use private businesses, private contractors to provide the services to the low-income communities and then get reimbursed by the state. Now you've got multiple levels of bureaucracy involved. You've got the money comes from Medicaid. Medicaid gives the money to the Minnesota Department of Health Services. The Minnesota Department of Health Services has multiple programs being run by bureaucrats, 14 of them currently under investigation. Then those programs just shovel the money out the door to providers, and sometimes that money even goes such as the Feeding Our Friends or Feeding Our Future program. It's going to be distributed at least 2 more levels before it ends up in the pocket of the fraudsters. So you sometimes have 3, 4, 5 levels of distribution of government funds between the federal government that gives the money and the fraudsters who receive the money. And everybody in the middle there, their only business, their metric for evaluation is how many people are they helping. That's basically treated as an honor system. Just tell us, and we'll send you a check.
Well, right. I mean, but that's I mean, that's not an excuse for this. I'm not saying you're saying it is, but I mean, so then, I mean, the stories over 10 years and nobody says, well, let's do a site visit. I mean, all these news outlets are essentially giving you all the goods to make an example of some of these fraudulent providers to send a message to the ecosystem that you're going to get caught if you do this.
Right, and let's talk about how broad that ecosystem is, though. So the Feeding Our Future fraud that kind of kicked all of this off, there were search warrants executed in January of 2022 by the Biden Department of Justice, led to 47 people being indicted in September of 2022. That was funded by the Department of Agriculture, a childhood nutrition program. Okay, now there's 14 more programs. I'll get to the connection in a second. There's 14 more social welfare programs under investigation by the Trump Department of Justice that is funded by Medicaid. That's HHS. I'm not entirely sure just yet, I haven't looked into it, where the funding for child care comes from. It could come from Medicaid, could be,
combo, federal and state. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have multiple funnels of money coming out of the federal government that is only limited by the imagination of the fraudsters.
Yeah.
And when the fraudsters start advocating for something, the state will step in and meet a program. So in Minnesota, and this is actually in every state, they have what's called waivered programs. And a waivered program is a program that applies to operate outside the typical rules imposed by Medicaid on the distribution of public funds. And they make a case for, we're going to do something innovative. It's going to be a little different. It's going to be more effective. And then HHS, Medicaid, approves it, and now they're not bound by the rules. And they just basically operate under whatever process and system they design for themselves. Now, what happened is the COVID fraud involving the childhood nutrition program was so ridiculous. I mean, you're talking about Somali community providers claiming they were feeding hundreds of thousands of meals a month. It's not that many kids.
Yeah.
But it was such easy money during COVID. It was just a fraudulent invoice, get a check. A fraudulent invoice, get a check. Over and over and over again every month. What happened was, as part of that investigation, the Trump administration realized, hey, some of these people are getting money from more than one public program. There's one particular one that kind of kicked off the second part of this investigation. It was an operator of a daycare center, a health clinic. Operator of a health clinic claimed to have fed 350,000 meals under the childhood program, but at the same time got $14 million for autism treatment. So that was Medicaid money. So they're getting USDA money for feeding non-existent meals to non-existent children, and then getting millions for performing autism services that were never provided to kids who didn't need it.
Right, but you know, but I mean, they clearly weren't so sophisticated that a whole host of state employees weren't picking up on what was going on. Thus, this open letter that they posted last month, essentially going after the governor's office and saying we tried to raise the specter of these fraudulent activities and we were turned away or threatened at every turn, and so one wonders if there's at least a possibility that you will have official misconduct here, that you'll see some legal accountability for the people that have oversight responsibility for these programs, including the elected officials.
Okay, well, now, but let's consider for a moment the motivations of the Walz administration. This is pumping billions of dollars of federal tax dollars into the Minnesota economy. I mean, that's good for the Minnesota economy. There are people in this Somali community and others. It wasn't 100% Somali, but it was overwhelmingly, like 90% Somali diaspora participants. Many of whom, though, now, what a lot of people don't understand is I think more than 50% of the Somali ethnic community is now U.S. born, because the Somali community began coming to the United States in the early 90s. So you've got a whole generation now that's U.S. born.
Right.
For the state of Minnesota, for those, and you're right, there were employees, but I don't think it was within the Walz administration. My understanding, I'd have to go back and look at it. You could be right. I think that was in the state legislative auditor's office, who was saying, these numbers can't be right. You guys need to look at this more closely. And the Walz administration people waved them off.
Mm-hmm.
No, we got it under control. But the Walz administration had every motivation to look the other way. I mean, the way Democrat administrations have dealt with the need for social services is to always just pay more money. It's never to pay less.
No, right. I mean, it's their constituency. The dependency is good news. More dependency is good news for them politically. I get it. In addition to what you said about, the infusion into the Minnesota economy. But the point is, and I guess you have to have some sort of evidence of intent because then you have intent to defraud, but potentially by bureaucrats or elected officials. But I mean, that's clearly what's going on here. You get everybody gets a little bit of taste. The fraudsters at the top of the pyramid are reaping millions of dollars. It's being sent all over the place, including walking through the local airport, according to TSA whistleblowers, and on its way through Abu Dhabi to Mogadishu to Al Shabaab. Maybe. I mean, this stuff is crazy. This is like a Jean Le Carre novel, and so you have people that are understandably looking for accountability beyond those street-level fraudsters.
Well, and let me back up just real quick to make this point, which I think underscores your point. The Biden administration indicted 77 people in connection with feeding our future childhood nutrition fraud.
Right.
The last indictment by the Biden Department of Justice was in February of 2024. So that's 11 months before the end of the Biden administration. They never indicted anybody for any other program. That one was just, it was just so massive it could not be ignored. And the Trump administration takes over in January 2025. By May of 2025, the Trump administration starts indicting people in other frauds because the Trump administration was willing to say, let's turn over some of these other leaks on the ground and see what we find. And now they've indicted people in 4 Medicaid-funded programs for fraud, which the Biden administration never touched, never wanted to look at, never wanted to inquire about, because it was going to implicate a one-party state. In effect, Minnesota is a one-party state.
Yeah.
And they knew it was there. It was political dynamite for them, so they opted to simply look the other way. Now, for purposes of criminal accountability, federal fraud statutes require an intent to essentially receive money by false or fraudulent misrepresentations. And so unless there's some evidence that Walz or other people in his administration financially benefited, it is not a crime for a state official to turn their head and look away.
Right.
You have political accountability for that, which we got yesterday. Tim Walz realized he can't win in a statewide election in November, and so he withdrew. That's really the accountability that Walz is going to get. Now, the one other place that the Biden administration never looked, but I suspect the Department of Justice is looking now, is at campaign finance issues.
Yeah,
the extent
right.
to which
Did the money make it to the campaign accounts? Right.
Exactly. And these frauds almost always have that sort of reverse pump angle to them, where the people that are putting the money in the system, they can't take it back and put it in their checking accounts, but they can take it back and put it in their campaign accounts.
Yeah. And why not? And by a little bit of political favoritism, perhaps, in the process, of course. Bill Shipley, 22 plus years as a federal prosecutor, 8 years in private practice. Check out his piece at substack.com /@shipwreckedcrew. The piece says, yes, the Trump Bondi DOJ is aggressively pursuing multiple fraud investigations in Minnesota, and he drills out the details to get everybody up to speed. It's a very good piece. Bill Shipley, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And he joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line. All right, well, that is, at least that's a wrap for today, but at least we're making progress in terms of understanding the full scope of things. As he said, accountability politically for Tim Walz